For as long as we've been human, we've been haunted by a couple of huge questions, right? Why do we have to die? And I mean, come on, why can't we just live forever? Well, today we're going to dive deep into this ultimate mystery, and we'll be using Nobel laureate Vinky Ramakrishna's incredible work to light the way. It's the question that fuels billions of dollars in research, inspires countless myths, and, let's be honest, touches on our deepest fears and hopes. But to even begin to answer it, we've got to wrap our heads around a really bizarre paradox that sits at the very heart of what it means to be alive. Okay, get ready for this because it's a total mindbender. Right now, literally as you're listening to my voice, millions of your cells are dying. And that's a good thing. It has to happen to keep you healthy, to make room for new cells. But here's the crazy part. The very second a person is declared dead, most of their body, we're talking cells, organs, the whole shebang, is still technically alive. That's how organ donation even works? It makes you wonder, what even is death anyway? Right? So before we can figure out why we die, we first have to agree on what death is. And it turns out that's way less simple than you'd think. The line between being alive and not is surprisingly fuzzy. The way we define death has always been tied to our tech. For centuries, it was ridiculously simple. Hold a mirror up to someone's mouth. If it doesn't fog up, well, they're gone. Then we figured out how to restart a stopped heart. So that changed everything. The definition had to shift. Now it's all about brain activity, or the lack of it. But even that really just tells us where the limits of our medical technology are today, doesn't it? And that brings us to a really useful modern definition. Death isn't just a single organ shutting down. It's the point of no return. It's that moment the entire system loses its ability to work together as one coordinated thing. The moment the body just can't function as a coherent whole anymore. Okay, so if death is the final system-wide failure, what's causing the system to break down to begin with? It's time to play detective and investigate the biological culprits that are responsible for aging. The best way to think about aging is not as one big event, but more like a slow-motion cascade of failures. It's this steady pileup of damage that starts at the tiniest molecular level and just works its way up, eventually affecting everything. So, where does this all kick off? Well, you go right to the source, our DNA. The master blueprint for our entire body gets worn down, damaged, and chemically modified as we get older. And we're not just talking about mutations. There are these things called epigenetic changes, which are like little sticky notes on our genes that change how they're read. It causes our cells to start acting weird over time. From there, the problem spreads to our proteins. These are the literal workhorses inside our cells. They do, well, everything. But as we age, the quality control system starts to get a little sloppy. Proteins get made wrong, they fold into weird shapes, and then they start to clump together. And this is exactly what creates those infamous plaques and tangles you see in the brains of people with Alzheimer's. Then you've got your mitochondria. Remember those from biology class? They're the little power plants inside every cell, turning food into energy. But over the years, they get less and less efficient. They start to sputter and leak these nasty molecules called free radicals. You can think of it like toxic exhaust fumes that start damaging the cell from the inside. And that brings us to our last major culprit, senescent cells. A better name for them, zombie cells. So these are cells that get damaged, and they do the right thing. They stop dividing so they don't spread the damage. That's good. But they refuse to die. They just hang around like zombies, spewing out all these inflammatory signals that call in the cavalry. When you're young, this is actually useful. It helps you heal. But as you get older, it just creates this constant low-grade inflammation all over your body that's a huge driver of aging. So yeah, from messed up DNA to these zombie cells, it's not one big thing that gets us in the end. It's really more like a death by 1,000 tiny cuts. So we have a pretty good idea of how our bodies fall apart. But that just leads to a much bigger, much deeper question. Why? Why didn't evolution just design us to last? Why do we seem to have a built-in expiration date? And the answer is, well, it's kind of brutal. Evolution doesn't give a damn about your individual survival. All it cares about is passing on genes. Fitness, in the biological sense, just means you're good at making babies that survive. After you've done that, from evolution's point of view, you're pretty much yesterday's news. You can see this trade-off perfectly in the animal kingdom. A mouse has a very high chance of getting eaten in its first couple of years. So evolution's strategy is grow up super fast, have a ton of babies, and don't worry about long-term maintenance. But a bowhead whale, it has almost no predators.
So it can afford a slow and steady strategy, investing in a durable body that can last for 200 years. It all comes down to the environment you're in.
And here's the really cruel twist in the story. So many of the biological systems that make us strong and healthy and fertile when we're young are the very same systems that cause us to break down later. A gene that helps our cells grow fast in our youth might also increase our risk of cancer in old age. It's a trade-off that is literally baked into our DNA.
But what if we could rewrite that programming? What if we could actually hack our own biology and cheat death? This is where we get into the really cutting-edge science, into the modern-day quest for immortality.
Okay, this next part is absolutely mind-blowing. Scientists figured out that you can take a totally normal adult cell, like from your skin, add just 4 little proteins, they're called Yamanaka factors, and you can literally rewind its biological clock. I mean, you turn it all the way back into what's called a pluripotent stem cell. That's a cell that can become any tissue in your body. This is not science fiction, people. This won a Nobel Prize. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. Researchers are looking at drugs like rapamycin that could give us the life-extending benefits of fasting, but without, actually having to fast. And in another wild area of research, scientists are finding specific factors in the blood of young animals that seem to rejuvenate the tissues of old ones. The science here is moving incredibly fast. All of this incredible progress leads us to our final and maybe our toughest section. If we actually succeed in this quest, we're going to have to face some really profound ethical questions. And the biggest one isn't can we, but should we? Seriously, just think about it for a second. What would actually happen to our world, to our culture, our economy, our families, if we could radically extend how long people live? What happens when one generation just doesn't make way for the next? And this is the ultimate conflict, isn't it? For each of us as individuals, the prize is amazing. More healthy years to spend with the people we love, to learn new things, to experience the world. But for society as a whole, there's a huge risk of stagnation. A world where older generations just keep accumulating wealth and power could become a world that's less dynamic, less innovative, and way less open to new ideas. Let's make this really personal. Imagine I could offer you a pill, right here, right now, and it was guaranteed to give you 10 extra years of perfectly healthy life. Would you take it? I know I would. Pretty much everyone would say yes in a heartbeat. And that's the dilemma. Our own powerful, personal desire for more life versus the potential cost to everyone else. Which leaves us with this final, really powerful idea to chew on. You could argue that it's knowing there's a finish line that gives the race its meaning. Knowing our time is limited is what pushes us to create, to love, to explore, to really live. So if we ever manage to get rid of that deadline, would we be gaining an eternity? Or would we just be losing the one thing that makes life worth living in the first place?